everybody. So I am super excited about this interview. We're doing it with Lieutenant Colonel Kendrick Carroll. I've been knowing him for about 2.5, 3 years now, and just a phenomenal leader. He is currently a student at the Air Force Air War College, and prior to that, he was the 8th Weapons School Commander. So not only is he a weapons school graduate, a weapons officer, but he was the commander of the weapons schoolhouse, the 8th Weapons Schoolhouse. And we're going to talk about everything air battle management. It's going to be a good interview. Stay tuned. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Rest TV. I'm Russell Lewis. I am a captain in the United States Air Force. I am an air battle manager, and I created a platform where civilian and military members can connect with the next generation of leaders. I understand the importance of mentorship because it changed my life. I want to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity. So without further ado, welcome to Mentorship Moments. So we got a lot in common. Before I even get into everything, we got a lot in common. You are from Mississippi. That's right. You are a member of a very, very humble and distinguished organization, like I am, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, if you must know. And you went to an HBCU. That's right. Mississippi Valley State University, Zeta Phi. Air battle manager. So how has all of that inspired you to be who you are?
So it started coming up, man. So as far as having a strong work ethic, that started when I was a kid. My dad was an enlisted maintainer in the Air Force. So, follow him around. I'm a brat. So I'm from Mississippi, but I lived all over the world. So imagine a little country boy from Camden, Mississippi. Canton is not very large at all. I think it's 2 exits off of I-55, and that's all you get. And then if you miss those two, you've missed Canton. Coming from Canton, lived in England. Funny part I always tell, the older I got, closer in age to my father's airman, the more the lines blurred between how he treated me and how he treated them. So imagine being a 16, 17-year-old kid, and your father's a first sergeant maintainer, crew chief, with airmen that are the same age or a year or two above you. I would tell you, if you haven't had that opportunity, I highly recommend it. But although I didn't enjoy it every day during those days, I tell you, I wouldn't change it for anything, man. That's where my work ethic came from him. Being from Mississippi, I had to overcome a lot of perceptions, right? Sometimes they were overt, sometimes they were overt bias, if you will. When people hear, oh, you're from Mississippi, sometimes they make assumptions about you, right? But like I said, because of my father's work ethic that he put into me, that gave me, the ability to essentially work harder than my peers had to, in some cases, to succeed. I use it as a motivation. So for me, one guaranteed way to make me work harder is to tell me what I can't do, or to tell me kind of what's beyond my reach, right? So that's like putting gasoline on a fire for me. I'm absolutely proud to be an HBCU graduate. Being an HBCU graduate, man, that was like, it was more than just being a student number or face in the crowd while I was there. When I was at Mississippi Valley State University, I say I, but all of us, we were seen as investments by the faculty. And once they poured into us, right, they invested into me and the rest of my peers and my classmates. So I felt that it was my task and privilege, if you will, to make good on that investment that they poured into me, and now to give those tangible returns, if you will, and reinvest my dividends into the next generation, so that folks like yourself that are coming up pick up where I left off, don't make the same mistakes that I made, and then keep it going, succeed, and be ready to pour in your dividends to the next generation that's coming behind. Being an alpha, man, listen, we don't have as much time as we need for that. I'll try to sum it up this way. I'm a life member of Alpha Phi Alpha, and I highly recommend those that have the opportunity to do so go and check that container as I stare at you through the camera. Being a life member, it epitomizes being, first of all, we are servants of all, right? And we transcend all. So the fraternity is proof that together we are so much more than we are individually. From, this, but for the folks that don't see this, from election campaigns, mentorship programs, food and blood drives, Alpha Phi Alpha is that force multiplier and catalyst for social change throughout the world, because there's literally chapters all over the world. I've been as far as Korea and got a chance to fellowship with active brothers there, Indo-Pacific AOR. So as far as how that ties into me as a leader in the Air Force, sometimes I think of the disenfranchisement that the founders experienced that led to their decision on that cold Tuesday night, right? Back in December of 1906. Somebody should have taught you about that. They didn't. Let me know. I'll circle back with you. No, I use that experience as a method, man, to shape my perspective. So when I'm introduced to new situations where there are elements of society, and in some cases even our Air Force, that are being affected by unfair treatment because of, fill in the blank, racial discrimination, religious discrimination, sexual orientation, whatever that may be, whatever those biases are, I try each day to uphold the aims of fraternity, right? So manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. So I try to even pull that into my daily life. And as far as I said all that about being an HBCU graduate, said all that I said about being a fraternity member, I'll tell you this, though. Once you're in active duty, frankly, nobody cares. And I say that in a positive way, though, meaning your performance is what matters. I went to a college in Itta Bena, Mississippi. That college and that town is as big as it sounds. Not very big, right? But as a squadron commander, I was sitting at the leadership table next to Air Force Academy graduates, Purdue. In some cases, there were even Harvard graduates at the table next to me. You know what never came up? Hey, where'd you get your bachelor's degree? They didn't judge me on where I got, my degree. They judged me on my performance and my leadership and my ability to contribute to the team to ensure that, we got the mission accomplished. So that was a long way to answer the question. Hopefully, I got to what you're looking at, getting after for that first question.
So we're going to roll into something I get asked all the time. And for those of you listening, watching, whatever the case may be, we are going to talk in depth about air battle management and what it means to be an air battle manager. So with that being said, sir, what is an air battle manager?
So my answer would depend on who my audience is. So if it was a civilian that I was talking to, I would give them the simplest answer that I could, which is essentially I find and ID targets and I put the forces together to go and kill them as expeditiously as possible. I tell people air battle managers are like the 3M of the air domain. 3M is a company that you don't know about, but you use their products every day. Every time you pick up a sticky note, every time you pick up super glue, you're using a 3M product. Meaning 3M didn't make that product. What they did, though, is made it better to the point where it's so invaluable that we use them day in and day out throughout our lives. That's kind of what an air battle manager brings to the air and land domains, I should say. And very quickly, we're closing the gap on being the multi-domain battle managers as well. So we are a force multiplier, if you will, and make everyone in the joint force team more lethal. So that's great, educating civilians on what we do. But I think where we as air battle managers, some cases, drop the ball is we do a very poor job of educating the joint force on what we do. So those operators in the other sister services that will either reap the benefits or work directly with us in any sort of multi-domain operation or major combat operation. So a lot of times we try to explain it from the end user's perspective. They use words like orient shooters and bring chaos or bring clarity to chaos. Great, what does that really mean? I can sum it up very, very, very quickly for you. Air battle managers have 5 skill sets. We manage information, we manage the force, we execute the continuum of control, we execute integrated surveillance and ID. We're the only entity that can do those things simultaneously and persistently across the battle space. So what do I mean by information management? So collecting, processing, and disseminating mission relevant data. Those are a bunch of words just saying information that I can determine off of my own platform or information that I get from other platforms. Force management, what is that? So force management is, that iterative process of planning for force accountability, packaging, and positioning, and resource management. All that really means is fuel, weapons, and sensors. My fuel, my weapons, my sensors, your fuel, your weapons, and your sensors. I wrap that up with that information that I get, and then I make some sort of tactical operation action through the continuum of control. The continuum of control simply means close control all the way to broadcast control, right? I can give you a heading, altitude, or vector, or I can give you pieces of information that allows you to go and now make that target go away as soon as effectively possible. And then finally, the integrated surveillance and ID. So the fusion of organic and remote sensors coupled with ROE to build a common operational picture. A bunch of words that simply says, I take my information organically, and I take your information, you being a fighter, bomber, tanker, AOC, and I take that information remotely, and I fuse that together, and I create a common and, more importantly, accurate operational picture. So today, as air battle managers, we can do that pretty effectively across the air domain, in some cases the land domain, speaking about the integration with the Army and our JSTARS brethren. Tomorrow, and I mean tomorrow, I'm talking in the next 3 to 5 years, we will, I humbly suggest that we will change, and if not only in title, in action for sure, we will become no longer air battle manager, we will become multi-domain battle managers, and using those same skill sets: information management, force management, the continuum of control, and integrated surveillance and ID simultaneously and consistently across the battle space. We're the only ones that can do that.
How often do air battle managers deploy? And I try to tell people, hey, it really just depends, but they don't want to take my word for it.
Perfect answer, right? It really does depend. As a career field, we're always in the fight. From rotations in the sitcom AOR, as you see that on the news, to our 24/7 persistence in the Indo-Pacific AOR. Like right now, as you and I are sitting having this conversation, there are air battle managers watching over North and South Korea. There are also air battle managers that are watching over us in the middle of the COVID-19 CONUS environment that we're living in as we rocking our shelter-in-place beard, at least I am. There are air battle managers right now at the eastern and western air defense sectors that are watching over us to ensure that our enemies don't capitalize on an opportunity to take advantage of coronavirus and potentially an opportunity for us to kind of take our eye off the ball. So you're right. The answer is it absolutely depends, but just know that there is not a AOR on the globe right now where air battle managers are not present and persistent in our capability.
Also, I try to explain to people the Doghouse at Tyndall Air Force Base and how difficult that process is, and rightfully so, because every decision you make, there is a life directly and indirectly attached to that decision. You are literally learning a new language, learning a new skill set, and having to apply that skill set day in and day out. So if you could, sir, tell me about your experience at the Doghouse and going through the undergraduate air battle management training.
I'm the old man in the room, so my experience at the Doghouse, it's a bit dated, if I'm being honest, because when I went through back in 2003, wow, that long ago, it was very much tactical fluid control. So remember that continuum of control piece that I was talking about was very much how do I get a fighter and a radar and being able to shoot beyond visual range missiles and survive an intercept, a force-on-force intercept. Now, what the Doghouse is doing is night and day and leaps and bounds above that. So Scout McGuire and the guys, and now Lieutenant Colonel Lynch and the rest of the team down there are doing a phenomenal job of making those air battle managers, they're closing that gap on that multi-domain battle each and every day. That information management, that force management, right? So those are the decisions of those skill sets that I mentioned earlier that UABMT, so undergraduate air battle manager trainees, are gaining day in and day out down at the Doghouse. So the Doghouse is just like a house, right? That house, if that foundation isn't solid, that house will start to slip and sink into the ground. That's what the Doghouse does for us. It builds that solid foundations. It gives those undergraduate ABM trainees skill sets of managing information, managing forces, executing the continuum of control, and that integrated surveillance and ID, and being able to do that persistently and simultaneously, more importantly, across the battle space. That's where it starts at the Doghouse. Without the Doghouse, doesn't really matter if you're on an E3 or E8 or a CRC because your foundation won't be there. Unfortunately, we will lose American and coalition lives because of our inability to execute those 5 skill sets simultaneously.
One thing I want to do is say thank you to all of the Doghouse faculty and staff, from Colonel Lynch to Cookie to Smooth to who used to be JG3. He's now Ram. We have Noko, so many amazing air battle managers, Hulk, and I know I'm going to get beat on for forgetting a few people. We talk about call signs a lot, and a lot of people just don't really understand why we have call signs. Can you explain that for them?
Absolutely. Everybody is a part of a critical team in the Air Force, in the Joint Force specifically. And what the call signs do is allows us to build camaraderie, one. More importantly, though, it allows us to level the playing field in the debrief so that that flight lead may or may not be a captain. He or she may be, brand new, if you will, in his or her flight lead or his or her a section lead if you're an air battle manager. And then if the general, the wing commander, the group commander is flying in that formation as well, that flight lead has responsibility to ensure the safe employment of that flight, or that section lead has the responsibility to ensure the effective employment of that section. What the call sign does is now allows us to level that playing field so that in the debrief, learning can occur without the hindrance of rank or position being introduced in inducing unnecessary bias in there. On top of the camaraderie piece, more importantly, it allows us to level that playing field so that we can all learn from each other and build a more effective fighting force.
So when it comes to a debrief, many people may not know what that is. Sir, what is your definition of a debrief?
So a debrief is based off the intent of the mission. right? So without knowing what you're going to go out there to execute in the first place, just going to go fly around and do some things, okay, it's going to be very difficult to debrief that. That's not what we do in the U.S. Air Force, right? We're good stewards of the taxpayers' money. So before we turn one wheel on the flight line, before we fire up one engine, we've already discussed in the mission planning day kind of what the intent of that mission's focus, if you will be. So we go out and we mission plan that mission. We determine what that focus and the objectives to that mission should be. We go and execute it. We bring it back to the debrief, right? Debrief ROE is in effect, just like our previous conversations. Call signs now on the table, so that we're kind of laying that, leveling the playing field. And now we debrief to the objectives that we discussed and that we determined on mission planning day. Without having the objectives, in my very humble opinion, you're not debriefing. You're having a conversation about what we did today and kind of, we did some good things, we did some bad things, because without understanding the objectives, assuming the objectives are valid, there is no way to actually determine whether or not you met those objectives. More importantly, if you didn't meet those objectives, how do you instruct those tangible fixes in order to meet the objective on subsequent sorties? So the way I run my debrief, if you will, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to reconstruct the mission. All I'm looking for is absolutely tangible, accurate data. X time happened, X event happened. Why? We'll get to in the debrief. And I will do that from the minute that mission started to the minute the mission concluded. Or if there's a section of the mission that directly tied to the objective, if you will, right? And so after the fact finding is completed, or reconstruction, we will determine whether or not we have a debrief focus point. Hear me when I say this. If your debrief focus point does not tied directly to your mission objective, you do not have a debrief focus point. You have something else. You have a conversation piece, a topic to discuss over whiskey, but you don't have a debrief focus point. So if you're ever struggling to find your debrief focus point, look at the objective first. If it's not directly or tied to the objective, you don't have a DFP, right? So assuming I have the ability to determine an accurate DFP, now, just as you said, I will look and determine line by line, minute by minute, what were those contributing factors, right? More importantly than just determining what the contributing factors were, I have to be able, if I'm going to be the instructor, and here's where I think in some cases we are not consistent in our career field, is just teaching the tangible instructional fix. If you're going to be an instructor, it's very easy to determine what the student did wrong. It's not so easy to teach how to specifically fix that problem. So as I determine those contributing factors to the debrief focus point, I will go line by line. This is where the debrief in some cases could become a little bit long, a little bit tedious, if you will, and take breaks as needed to ensure that the learning occurs, because the whole point of this is to ensure that we maximize our lethality and our effectiveness on the battlefield, and we save American and coalition lives, and we take as many enemy lives as we can as expeditiously as possible. So I continue that process and determining the contributing factors, teaching the tangible instructional fixes until I determine what that root cause is. Once that root cause is determined, now I can teach very specifically a student of mine, if you don't do this step and you do these steps that I teach you, now you have mitigated your debrief focus point, and now you have the ability to meet your objective. So I'll say once again, if you cannot tie your DFP to your objective, you don't have a DFP.
So as a former commander of the 8th Weapons School, which happens to be the weapons school for air battle managers, what advice do you have for people that are interested in going to weapons school and people that are going through weapons school right now?
Okay, so I got to clarify something for you before I get jumped. Once folks in our community see this, the 8th Weapons Squadron is not just the weapons school for air battle managers. At the 8th Weapons Squadron, we teach advanced battle management, electronic warfare, and graduate level flying tactics and cross-domain integrations to ABMs, RC-135 Victor Whiskey, and EC-130 Hotel EWOs, as well as the instructor weapons directors throughout the course. So every WD in the CRCs has an opportunity to go through the weapons school as a part of the advanced instructor course, which is also housed under the 8th Weapons Squadron. They use the call sign Clubhouse on the radio. And then, of course, you got, like I said, the Compass Call and the Rivet Joint Electronic Warfare Officers, so EWOs there, also fall under the 8th Weapons Squadron as well. Just for clarity, right? Ironically enough, we are the 4th oldest and the most diverse squadron in the United States Air Force Weapons School. So all that, now let me answer your question. Best advice I could give to a new weapons officer. It'll sound cliche to anybody that's ever heard the three keys, if you will, of being humble, being credible, being approachable. That sounds absolutely cliche. Humility, especially, here's where, in some cases, guys and gals struggle. They become instructors because you got to be an instructor just to get to weapons school, right? So in order to be an instructor in our career field, you're probably pretty good at what you do. So you get selected for weapons school, great. You go to weapons school, great. You graduate weapons school, great. And now you come out with your brand new shiny patch. And therein lies the risk of becoming, I'll say it like it is, becoming arrogant and somewhat of a know-it-all. Let me be the first to tell you, I've been a weapons officer since 2007. No weapons officer knows it all. A weapons officer, not a patch wearer, and there's a difference. And we don't have enough time for me to get into the difference between being a weapons officer and a patch wearer, because that'll get an emotional response out of me, and we'll run out of Zoom minutes. So I'll stick to the question for the sake of time. Call me back and we'll talk about the difference between being a patch wearer and a weapons officer. But an effective weapons officer is humble, meaning humble enough to say, I don't know, even when you're standing in front of a large crowd with your shiny new patch on your shoulder. Because if you're humble enough to say, I don't know, there in front of them, that saves you from losing your credibility when potentially there is someone in the crowd that does have that answer. I found that once you graduate from weapons school, at times you're running to one of two extremes. That guy or gal that wanted to be just like you, or that guy or gal that wanted to be nothing like you, meaning because they probably had a bad experience with a weapons officer at some point in the past. Those are equally dangerous, because if you don't have your humility in check, that guy that wants to be just like you hangs on your every word. That word's inaccurate, that word's wrong, if that information is just spewing as bad dope, now that person who wants to be just like you takes it and runs with it and starts to spread the same bad dope. Conversely, the person that doesn't like weapons officers for one reason or another, and you run the risk of ruining your credibility because maybe he or she has the right answer, because you're not humble enough to say, I don't know. Now you run the risk of he or she raising their hand and go, nope, that's not the correct answer, Mr. Weapons Officer, guy or gal with your shiny new patch. Here's actually the correct answer. Now you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to now risk your credibility because you're not humble enough to say simply, I don't know, let's go find the answer. Not you go find the answer. Let us together go find the answer, because we're still learning, even with our brand new patch on our shoulder. So there's humility piece, the credibility piece, right? So being able to solve the problem. I tell people a lot of times, the weapons school is a leadership course disguised in tactics, if you will. So being able to go and be a problem solver, whether or not you realize it, the weapons officer in most cases is the DO and the commander's problem solver. You probably have seen weapons officers doing things that are not even remotely related to being tactical in nature, if you will. I've seen them do everything from solving tactical problems to planning the Christmas party. I'm going to let my weapons officer plan the Christmas party. You never know what that commander's priorities are. Maybe there was a low morale moment in the squadron. Maybe there are suicides in the squadron. Maybe the Christmas party is the one thing that commander needs to go right in order to get his or her squadron back on track. There's a guy or gal in that squadron that has the ability to solve problems regardless of what they are, and that's that weapons officer, right? So that's that credibility piece. My last one, the approachability piece. I tell people all the time, as a weapons officer, you do yourself and your squadron a disservice. The whole point of being a weapons officer is to increase the combat lethality of the squadron. You do them a disservice if you're unwilling to listen to the views and being able to work with other people. You cannot do it by yourself. Even the most inexperienced airman in your squadron can give keen insight to solving a problem, be it tactical or otherwise. And I use the analogy of being an unapproachable weapons officer is like being a doctor in a room full of cancer patients, right? If I'm an oncologist and I've got a room full of cancer patients, but they're unwilling to talk to me because I'm unapproachable, that means they would rather die than to talk to me. That's what you're doing as an unapproachable weapons officer, because your whole goal in life is to increase the combat lethality of your squadron. If your squadron is unable to talk to you because of your lack of approachability, that's what they're saying. They would rather figure it out on their own, which causes American and coalition lives, because my weapons officer is not approachable. So be humble, be approachable, and above all, be credible, and of course, be a leader. Be the example that you want others to follow. Be that on and off the jet.
Sir, a lot of people think just because you are a weapons officer that you better your chances over a non-weapons officer at becoming a commander. Is that true?
No, in short. So I'll tell you, if promotion is your motivation for becoming a weapons officer, don't do it, because it takes too much time, effort, time and effort to prep to go to weapons school while you're at weapons school, and to more importantly, be that weapons officer, not the patch wearer once you graduate. There are much, in my humble opinion, much easier routes, if you will, to promotion than that. And frankly, the instructors out at the 8th Weapons Squadrons, they'll see right through that. And if that's your motivation, they'll see right through that, and you won't succeed in that effort, because you will put on the table at some point your humility, your approachability, and your credibility. And if those aren't in check, then no, that will not lend you, if you will, to a path, the direct path to being a commander. I tell you again, the weapons school is a leadership course of disguise and tactics. So if that's what you're thinking your path to greatness, or if you will, or being a commander is, think again, there's a different road that you should take. And I would argue that you probably have your priorities skewed, because being a commander, frankly, isn't about you. The minute you become a commander, you put that wreath on your wings, on your name tag, it becomes about those folks in your squadron.
Sir, what advice do you have for students at Tyndall, or even air battle managers all over the globe right now, trying to figure out, should I go to AWACS or JSTARS?
The AWACS versus JSTARS argument, there are two variables, if you will. First and foremost, it's just needs of the Air Force. Sometimes there are vacancies in one platform or the other that we just have to fill. And then I personally am a proponent of, if there is genuine interest, meaning some people frankly just prefer to work with the air-to-air platforms and the speed of the intercepts, if you will, and the culture that is part of being at Tinker primarily, and of course Elmendorf. If that kind of suits you more so than working with the land component at JSTARS unit, super critical and super important, especially in today's fight open in the CENTCOM AOR, then if you have an opportunity to give your vote, for lack of a better term, then vote. For sure, but just keep in mind that in some cases the needs of the Air Force will trump that. If there's a vacancy at Robbins for the E8, and you want to go to Tinker, in some cases you'll have to go to Robbins. That doesn't mean you'll never get an opportunity to be an AWACS guy or gal. That means that your first assignment will be at Robbins, and then now you get an opportunity afterwards to go to another platform. Especially now that CRCs are getting gate months accrued at the same time, so it's not like it used to be where you would lose gate months if you went to a ground assignment. So that's one less variable, and I think AFPC did a great job of fixing the glitch, if you will, on that one. So there's nothing to say that if you didn't get your first choice right out of the UAPMT, that first ops assignment, you can absolutely switch platforms. And frankly, I think that makes you a better air battle manager, because you get to see it from the other platform's perspective. Battle management, those same 5 skill sets that I talked about earlier, it's platform agnostic.
We see so many commanders that come out of AWACS and not very many that come out of JSTARS. If I want to become a commander one day, should I go AWACS, or do I have a good chance of becoming a commander if I go JSTARS?
Being a commander is about leadership, and leadership is platform agnostic. What I think you're seeing is just sheer numbers, metrics, if you will. The perception that there are more commanders than AWACS commanders than there are JSTARS is because there's probably more AWACS squadrons than there are JSTAR squadrons. So it's just numbers. It has nothing to do with the platform itself. It has everything to do with leadership and the Air Force's take, if you will, on that officer's ability to lead at the squadron level, and frankly above the squadron level, regardless of the wings or he or she may wear on their chest, or regardless of the Form 8 that says you're an E8 air battle manager versus an E3 air battle manager. Does not matter.
As an air battle manager, what should I expect on my first deployment?
Your first deployment as an air battle manager, I'm assuming that first deployment is probably going to be somewhere in the CENTCOM AOR, just because of the dynamics that is in the world today. I think you should expect to learn a lot, right? Lean on your section leads, for sure. God gave you one mouth and 2 ears, and it sounds a bit arrogant, and I mean that sincerely, not that you're not a valued member of the team. We talked about teaching all the way from the foundation at Tyndall to the graduate level, advanced flying tactics at the weapons school. What I can't teach you, though, unfortunately, is experience, right? Some of that you have to gain for yourself, and that on your first deployment, you'll see that your learning curve, if I had a graph in front of me, that learning curve would be pretty vertical, especially the first 60 to 90 days of that deployment. Once you get about halfway, you'll start to see that start to taper off as you get into the battle rhythm, if you will, and then you'll see very, very quickly you will become the expert as well. And your first deployment, before you tap out, you'll probably be training another crew that comes to replace you and your buddy flights. You, as the inexperienced guy or gal, you'll see very quickly after that initial steep learning curve, you'll start to plateau and you'll get into the groove, if you will, being an effective battle manager in your deployment. And you'll see, you'll become very quickly the expert, and the Air Force will rely on you to teach others as those crews come in to swap out, and they'll learn from you as well in your experience.
Going from AWOL to SD, how difficult is that transition, and what should that air battle manager expect with that transition?
Remember when I said weapons school was a leadership course disguised in tactics? That's the biggest leap, is being a leader of the section. So I think very quickly that term SD will start to fade away, and it will turn into frankly just a section lead. But I get where you're getting at. Being able to supervise those AWOLs or air weapons officers, and being able to prioritize you, the SD. So you just went from being one of many, right? So depending on the crew complement, you have one all the way up to 6. Or if you're a kingpin, you could have even more than that working for a singular SD or section lead. And so not everything is important at the same time. Absolutely goes back to mission planning. And if I had a whiteboard behind me, weapons officers love their whiteboards and their colors, I would draw a sample mission timeline, meaning those crunch points where I expect us to be. A crunch point on an E3 or an E8 or a CRC is when you're doing multiple things at the same time. If we're only doing check-in, that's an easy day. If we're only doing TAC fluid control, that's an easy day. If we're only doing close air support and the 1 OP, that's an easy day. When it's a crunch point, it's when we've got multiple phases. I think they still teach the phases of the intercept down at Luke. When we've got the TAC admin and the target BDR employment in the over target area, all of that's happening at the same time. That's when it becomes a crunch point, if you will, for any section, frankly. But if you're talking specifically for the senior director, that's where he or she makes their money, because he or she has got to be in front of that timeline in order to prepare the jet. So maybe I have to configure the jet, be it in radios or sensors. So I've got to be ready for that. And now keeping the team apprised of what he or she's doing, he or she being the SD in this example, so that, hey, team, we've got this event coming up in 60 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever the timeline may be. DCA controller, you've got these frequencies. Strike controller, you've got these frequencies. Make sure your radios are working. If the SD is doing that in the middle of that crunch, we've got problems, because we're not being as lethal as we can. We're not managing the information. We're not managing the force. We're not doing the effective integrated surveillance and ID or the continuum of control simultaneously and persistently across the battle space. Have I said this already? That battle management thing from way earlier when we were talking about it? It's just as simple. Anyway, that's the thing I would tell you. Be a leader for sure. One part I would tell you of being a leader, sometimes I would caution section leads to be the leader you wish you had. Just because now you're an SD and no longer the AWOL, that does not make you the know-it-all. The same way you knew things that your SD or your section lead didn't know when you were in his or her shoes, right? So empower your team. Play to your team's strengths and weaknesses, especially if you've got a hard crew, if you're in a deployed environment. If you've got a guy or gal that's absolutely fluid with the switch actions, or a guy or gal that's absolutely fluid with the tanker plan, play to their strengths. Empower them, and frankly, trust them. What you should be there to do is to ensure that they have what they need, be it a sensor information or a configuration of the aircraft, or I was going to say OM, that's how old I am. We don't use OMs anymore in the CRC, on the floor, and then making sure they have that configuration that they need in order to do their jobs, and then empower them. If they're falling down on the contract, pick them back up. If it's a safety of flight, or be it your own aircraft or aircraft under control, fix it and then give it back to them. My very humble opinion, we can debrief anything but safety. And so back to our debrief conversation. If I mission plan effectively, I prioritize my contracts, and now I can empower my team to do their jobs. Don't be that micromanager on the jet or on the ops floor. And now the team is afraid to make a decision, to manage information, to manage forces, to execute the continuum of control, because I got to wait for the SD or the section lead to tell me you're now handcuffing or handicapping your team.
Any last piece of advice, whether it's for young leaders, new air battle managers, students at the Doghouse right now, just for anybody in general?
I'll give you 3 things, and I'll try to do it as quickly as possible, because I know people say, Phelps, you talk too much. I'll tell you, man, I'm in my own house and out of my uniform, so I can say it out loud, man. Hey, prayer still works for me personally, right? When we talk about in the Air Force having that balance, right? Emotional balance, physical balance, spiritual balance. For me, that's absolutely a part of my balance piece, right? So find you a spiritual outlet. If you don't got a God, you want a God, I got a God, and I'll tell you about my God if you want to hear about my God, all right? So I'll leave that there. I try to live my life, and I got kids, as young, this is my computer, getting updates. That's great. I've got kids that, my youngest is 13, my oldest is 19. I tell them all the time, control what you can. And I mean that, meaning absolutely control it. Leave nothing to chance, right? Because excuses don't produce results. And then, frankly, don't sweat the rest. Because if the rest is out of your control anyway. So don't lose sleep. Don't give yourself anxiety attacks over things that you can't control. If you can't control it, right? See part A of this line. Control what you can, right? I tell her, when preparation and opportunity meet, success is the outcome, right? And then the final one, so there's the two, right? Find your God, press your works, control what you can. And then the last one, I'll tell you, life happens. You're going to struggle at times, right? But see it through. A long time ago, I was in I'll call it a stressful situation. I learned something. And there was a poem, the last stanza of the poem says, you may fail, but fall still fighting. Don't give up. Whatever you do, eyes front, head high, to the finish. See it through. That's all I got, brother.
Sir, I want to thank you again for spending time with us here. You have given some amazing points that I'm sure not only air battle managers, not only students will appreciate, but also those individuals throughout our United States Air Force. So, sir, I appreciate you spending time with me on this mentorship moment, and I can't wait for the next one.
My pleasure. I appreciate you. Thanks for picking up the stick, man, and leading the effort to ensure that we get as many opportunities to mentor each other in addition to the generation that's coming behind us, so to speak. So I appreciate it. Thank you for even inviting me. I'm honored to even be considered. So I appreciate it, brother.
Absolutely. So I am Captain Russell Lewis.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Kendrick, Carroll.
And we will see you all next time.